Hello and happy Earth Day. Thank you so much for joining us for this very special program on a topic that is very near to my heart and also to many, I think, fostering environmental justice through the arts and education. My name is Chela Montoya, and I'm the Assistant Vice President of Public Programs at LACMA. And today you're going to hear from artists, cultural workers, and leaders addressing environmental justice, the arts, and education accessibility. Participants include Cèline Semaan, founder of the Slow Factory Foundation, Mali Kawahata, the former policy advisor for energy and climate action in Obama's White House, and artist and eco-activist Mel Chen. The program is presented in partnership with Unity and Color, moderated by Jasmine Solano, its founder, who is a fearless leader and climate activist. Jasmine Solano is an influencer known for bridging the gap between culture, corporate, and community. Over the past 10 years, Jasmine has gained an international reputation as a DJ on camera and radio host and curator of for a range of clients, including music, film, fashion, philanthropy, and I will add the arts. In 2017, Jasmine founded Unity in Color, a global photography series and platform showcasing inclusive solidarity for women's equality. In 2020, Jasmine co-founded Clubhouse Global, which is a social impact live stream platform that has since employed over 300 artists and amassed over 20 million channel views during the pandemic. She has been featured in the New York Times, Vogue, Paper Magazine, New York Magazine, Elle, and Forbes.com. As you can hear, you are in great company, and I will now invite Jasmine to the virtual stage to introduce our panelists.
Yes, hello everyone. Cello, thank you for that amazing introduction. Everyone, as you will see, we have these coordinated Zoom backgrounds that were designed by my good friend Deanna Nunez. And you'll see that we all have them today, which is something really special. Now, I am based in Los Angeles at the moment, and that is also where LACMA Museum is based. If you have yet to visit Los Angeles, we have Cèline Semaan coming up soon, who is based in New York, Mali Kawahata, who is based in Montana, and Mel Chen, who's based in Egypt, North Carolina. Now, I would like to begin today with a land acknowledgement, especially on this Earth Day. I would like to acknowledge the following people whose land I am on today, the Tongva. The Tongva tribe has been indigenous to the Los Angeles basin for 7,000 years. Historians estimate that by the time the first Spanish land expedition reached California in 1769, there were nearly 100 Tongva villages and nearly 5,000 Tongva people. It was in 1769 when the Spanish forced the mission system onto the Tongva people, who in result suffered from diseases, harsh living conditions, and significant cultural change in which many did not survive. However, some did. And the estimated Tongva population today is about 3,000. The name Tongva comes from several different sounds in the Tongva language that means Mother Earth and place within that earth. And they are known for being very connected with their land. As someone on this land, I am obliged to share their history and acknowledge their current presence. And it also sets the foundation for our talk today, as the topic is fostering environmental justice through the arts and education. Now, to break that down a bit and explain the definition, environmental justice is the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, with respect to the development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. When we say fair treatment, that means no group of people should bear a disproportionate share of the negative environmental consequences resulting from industrial, governmental, and commercial operations or policies. Environmental justice issues and examples include inadequate access to healthy food, inadequate transportation, air and water pollution, and unsafe homes. And today we're going to be talking about ways to foster this justice through arts and education. I'm so excited to introduce you to all of our panelists and explain what unity in color even is, especially for those who are brand new to hearing about it. All right, let's start the collages. So I founded Unity in Color in 2017 as a direct result from the election in 2016. I was thinking about Inauguration Day and social media and how I use social media to express a lot of my beliefs as well as my music resume. And I wanted to take a photo shoot with several women, and I wanted us to all wear the same color palette. So I started doing research about what colors represented earlier feminist movements or ancient divine femininity, and yellow and gold kept coming up. And I invited 25 women to take a photo. And I said, this photo we are going to post on Inauguration Day as a symbol and as a pledge to each other that no matter what happens in these next 4 years and beyond, we are going to stand together in solidarity for our equality and for our rights. I invited 25 women, like I said, 50 women showed up. Within a week of us posting this photo, I had inquiries from 3 other cities in the US asking how they could then produce a photo shoot like this in their hometown. And then I gave the movement legs and devoted my life to it to give it infrastructure so that the model could be duplicated no matter where it was done. And in this photo collage here, you see photo shoots from New Orleans, Miami, Austin, Denver, Jakarta, Indonesia. And now 4 years later, we have produced over 45 photo shoots around the world, from Tokyo to Trinidad, Brooklyn to Berlin, and all across the United States. It has also expanded beyond these photo shoots. These are a catalyst for conversations where now we have events, exhibits, and panel discussions like the one we have today. And if you go to the next slide, I'll show you some other photos. This is from Honolulu, Detroit, Tokyo, and I know we have our Tokyo producer, Miho, in the audience today, also Columbus, Ohio. So the beauty in all of this is that we're able to share not only our similarities, but our differences in the ongoing struggle for women's equality worldwide. And I'm truly grateful to Cello and the whole LACMA team for giving Unity in Color and myself the space to have this conversation today. All right, let's get into our amazing panelists. The first one I would like to talk about is Molly Kawahata. She is a former policy advisor for energy and climate change at the Obama White House, where she helped implement President Obama's energy agenda and the Climate Action Plan, which is a series of groundbreaking energy policies to decrease US greenhouse gas emissions. She has worked on numerous political campaigns and has worked as an independent consultant, advising nonprofits and community organizations on clean energy and climate communications and advocacy. Molly also does podcasts and talks on climate topics to help activists improve their communications and framing of the climate crisis, engage effectively with leaders, and make the movement more inclusive. Molly's ultimate goal is to give everybody access to the climate movement and make the climate movement fight for everybody through systemic change. She is a board member for the San Francisco League of Conservation Voters and a fellow with the Clean Energy Leadership Institute. She works on clean energy in the tech sector. In her free time, she is passionate about alpinism and climbs mountains in the Pacific Northwest and Alaska, which you can see on her Instagram. It is unbelievably inspiring. Okay, our next panelist that I'd love to talk about is Cèline Semaan, who is a Lebanese Canadian designer, writer, advocate, and public speaker. She is the founder of Slow Factory Foundation, a 501c3 public service organization working at the intersection of environmental and social justice, which provides a conference series promoting sustainability literacy called Study Hall, and the first science-driven incubator in fashion called One by One. She is on the Council of Progressive International, has been a Director's Fellow of MIT Media Lab, and served on the board of directors of AIGA New York, a nonprofit membership organization that helps cultivate the future of design in New York City. I wish I had a little woo 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 or a clap audio sound next time. Okay, and last and certainly not least is Mel Chin. Mel Chin conveys complex ideas and themes through a mutative strategy, working alone or employing different disciplines and people, compelled by researched concepts. From such critical means, actions, films, to objects are realized as necessary. His Revival Field from 1991 pioneered green remediation using plants to remove toxic metals from the soil. From 1995 to 1998, he formed the collective, the GALA Committee, that produced In the Name of the Place, a public art project conducted on American primetime television. His actions for the Fundred Project from 2008 to 2019 to end childhood lead poisoning activated mass public engagement as a means for policymaker education. He has produced original films such as 9/11, 9/11 in 2007, to decenter preoccupations that engender nationalism, and The Arctic is Paris in 2015, to deliver the poignant warnings of a Greenlandic subsistence hunter to an international audience. In 2018, he filled New York Times Square with Wake on the ground and Unmoored in the air, creating an experiential portal into a past maritime industry and a future of rising waters. All Over the Place, a 40-year survey, was named by Hyperallergic as the best New York City exhibition of 2018. He is the recipient of many awards, grants, and honorary degrees, including a MacArthur Fellowship in 2019. So now is the wonderful part where I talk less and our panelists talk more. If we could bring our panelists onto the stage, that would be amazing so that everyone can now put a face to the name. If everyone would like to turn their cameras on so we can see these beautiful backgrounds. Yes, 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 amazing. And so I would love for each of our panelists to say hi to our audience and maybe let us know what you're currently working on. And we can go in the direction of Cèline, Mel, and then Molly.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, LACMA, and thank you, Jasmine, for such a beautiful introduction. I'm so honored to be here with Molly and Mel and yourself. Um, can you guys hear me okay?
You sound
And
great.
such an honor to be here. I could you repeat the question? It's not starting
Yes,
with you.
I would love for you to say hi and let people know what you're currently working on.
What am I currently working on? I feel so, um, a bit like crazed today because it's Earth Day, and Earth Day is essentially like a big wedding day for all the environmentalists that I know. We've been on live since this morning. The first one started at 8 a.m., so it's been nonstop. So what we're working on at the Slow Factory, a non-for-profit, as Jasmine said. In my own words, I think the Slow Factory is a school, a lab. We have several programs right now. We are rolling out. We are in the middle of Open Education, which is a free online educational series that caters for Black, Brown, Indigenous, minority ethnic people from all around the world. We have about 20,000 students right now enrolled in Open EDU, Open Education. We call it Open EDU for short. And we tackle, we don't tackle anything. We are very peaceful, but we do explore multiple topics at the intersection of climate justice and human rights. And we like to look at the intersections of topics, of disciplines. For example, we look a lot at between the intersection of science and design, racial justice and climate justice, and so on. And tomorrow, I invite everyone to tune in. There will be the history of regenerative agriculture that I invite everyone to tune into. It's at 12 p.m. EST. And it's on the Slow Factory website. I can send you all a link if you are interested.
Amazing. Yes, Cèline. Wait till you hear from everyone. Everyone is part of the super busy club, but I understand, especially Celine's life. Mel, how are you? And please tell us what you're currently working on. You are quite the jet setter.
Well, right now, just earlier, I was chasing my two chickens and getting them, make sure they're fed. I built a chicken tractor.
Mhm.
But in the studio, I'm in framing a work. that I made specially for the a Syrian UN refugee project, which comments on the hunger that people have been going through in Syria and in Yemen, so the Yemen crisis. Prepping up, getting all my stuff ready for the Four Freedoms campaign, the poster where I've translated Black Lives Matter appropriately into Chinese characters, so it cannot be ridiculed, because sometimes those translations that are here now are not correct. And so that is a new incentive to be better together. The more attacks on Asians that are occurring, the more important to unify with Black Lives Matter. And the most powerful way we do it is actively engage, spiritually engage, and just do it, you know. So these are a couple of things, and making new work for exhibitions, from getting chalk from England to draw oyster shells in a project on blackboards that will be a commentary. People have lost their lives to COVID, sort of like the world was their oyster until COVID hit. So creating memorials for people. So the studio is full of activities and getting ready for exhibitions in the fall and the winter and this next year. And in the meantime, maintaining a clear eye in the Fundred project, finally the Fundred project, which we have 500,000 drawings that was gifted to individual drawings of money. It's all about the money. We gifted to the Brooklyn Museum. And we're finishing that project in Chicago at the Smart Museum. We're launching the bill for ill, and hopefully provoke the signing of a bipartisan act of Congress called the Lead Safe Housing Act for Children, because, well, we could speak more about that project, but that is a 13-year run. So just a few things, but not. I want to shut up before I get too tired, and listen to all you beautiful people and the beautiful background that we have going here. Okay.
Thank you, Mel. And I will definitely dive into that project, because it's one to really explore, especially to this audience. Now, Molly, please tell us how you're doing and what you are currently working on.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Kawahata. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm really honored, especially to be a part of this panel with this incredible audience here. So I am a former policy advisor for energy and climate change at the White House under President Obama. And in that time, climate action was a huge priority in the second term. And we really did everything we could with the tools we had. But at one point, I started to realize that really you cannot get policy done at a really big level without having the American people on board. And you cannot get the American people on board unless they feel something. And that's why I think that this group in particular, and all of you folks who are listening, have an incredible power in not only just supporting the climate movement and helping it, but leading it. And so that's why I'm so excited to talk to you all today.
Amazing. All right, I'm ready to dive in. Now, if you have a question for a panelist or for all of the panelists, please type it in the Q&A on the bottom. And in the last 15 minutes of this hour, we're going to get to your questions. So we'd love to hear from you. Don't be shy. Here is your time to access these amazing people front and center. So think about that as we continue this talk. Now, my first question today, and this is for everyone, in your work, what has been the most powerful tool that you've come across to affect change? And maybe give us the context in which it was used. And we'll go Cèline, Mel, and Molly.
Thank you so much. I really feel like we are at such an important time right now. Since 2019, apparently, sustainability has reached mainstream. That's what the media recorded. That's just 2019. It's not too long ago. And soon after that, we had this the pandemic. We are still in the pandemic, and this extremely destabilizing event, let's say. But a lot of the climate activists and a lot of people looking at what's going on have really observe the pandemic as a rehearsal, if you will, a very sad rehearsal, but a rehearsal of what is to come. And during this time, the awareness around climate really, really accelerated in the public's eye. People started to suddenly understand this relationship between climate justice, human rights, our health, our well-being, how all of these converged into, a very big holistic experience. And that's where I would say that it accelerated even further than from the mainstream into where people want to take action. And I feel like exactly what Molly said, this group and us and having this conversation on Earth Day is important because there are so many misconceptions about being part of this climate movement. There's a lot of what I observe and what always comes back is this idea that we need to be perfect. We are held at such a high standard for engaging in any type of social justice or climate justice. And so, therefore, a lot of people prefer not to do anything. And so, therefore, they can be exempt of criticism. But when we are taking the lead, being courageous enough to try to speak, to lead, to mobilize, even within our own small communities, it starts with your family and friends, neighborhoods. Uh, we become held, we become to, I posted about this recently, we become kind of like saints, if you will. But although we are not perfect and we are held at such an realistic expectations that everything we do must be completely climate carbon negative. But it's kind of crazy because even me talking to you right now, I'm emitting carbon. So, and just every one of us, we breathe and we are part of this world. So there is this contradiction, I think, that we have to be at peace with. I don't know if I answered your question, but these were the thoughts that I had to share.
Well, and they're all important, and we're going to dive into that. And I think you're touching on, the purity meter that, especially with social media, that everyone holds each other towards, and how it discourages folks from learning and diving in. And I think that is a very important notion to bring up. Mel, I'm curious, as someone who has explored so many different mediums of art, has there been one tool or one type of art that you saw made the most change within your career so far?
Well, always there's been so many psychological upheavals that that is disruptors that correct yourself. I think the willingness to be critical of oneself is hyper important. I remember going down to help after Katrina in New Orleans way back when, and thinking as an artist I could come up with something or do something or be positive just to help. But I was so moved by the people we interviewed, not the physical destruction, but the people, the survivors, the families of people that were lost, that I was shook to realize my inadequacy, that the magnitude of what had transpired required actions of equal magnitude, and I was not adequate. So, first, to have self criticism, to engage, but then to know that if you can get there, to dive deeper, to return again and again, to use science or other tools outside my discipline to learn. That's where I found out that before Katrina, 30 to 50% of the inner city childhood population of New Orleans of children were poisoned with lead, like many cities across America before the storm. And then I realized then what the issue was money. There was no capital for that. All talk about rebuilding New Orleans. And then I realized if it's about money, then I'm not a fundraiser, but we'd have to make it. And the critical word, if you talk about a tool, is to take yourself or oneself and ego out of the equation and say, we would have to make it. In other words, I felt that a art project could be the children of people that are most endangered, who have no political voice, could draw their own, let's say, $100 bill. That's where the fundred came, the fundred bill. And our only obligation is not to be the artists, but to collect them and represent them, to give them value, the highest value could be for this transformation. So again, and even the transformation of that project is a long history, but again, it's always being willing to know and confront your inadequacy with action.
Well said. And just to paint a picture, and maybe we can put a link in the chat to this video for the Fundred project. Imagine, and how many dollar bills did you get drawn?
Well, so far we have a 500,000 individually drawn bills from all over the country, every state in the country. You can go to fundr.org, and we're still collecting. And it's not that, and the idea was really we're holding them, and now that collection is going to the Brooklyn Museum as a permanent piece of drawings of the people of America, not by me. I just designed the palette so that it looked good, you know, for
Right.
something to be
And
worth.
and then fill in the gaps for me. So you have buckets of this fake money that then gets delivered in a truck. Looks almost like a professional money bank carrier, and you land on the footsteps of Congress, or right,
Well,
and say, yeah,
yeah.
fill in the gaps and paint the
Okay, well,
picture of how amazing
this
this
is
is.
the evolution. It has transformed. You know, what happened, we do have an armored truck, the Thunder truck, and it's not buckets, they're pallet. We've built them in bundles of 8,000 drawings for each one, and we have thousands of pounds of them. And that whole palette as an artwork of people is being gifted to the Brooklyn Museum. But before that, what we began to realize that it was not an engagement where it's art, even exchange of not fake money, because it's more powerful. The value of a person's voice, whether it's a grandmother or a child, to transform the environment they live in is what it's about, to say it's worth something. And we use that capital, that creative capital, to have children and parents, now grown-ups, go to meet their lawmaker from their state and say, look, there's a policy that act that's out there that just came out a couple of years ago, by the way. Probably not because of our action, because it's the reality. And then we're putting all our cash behind that, because that could possibly transform the situation as a start. There's a lot to do. It's also how the project has evolved into that realm. So yes, there's still the truck, there's still the armor, the safe house door, and we're building one in Chicago, a new one in Chicago at the Sweetwater Foundation, and we're involved with the Source Studios, which is the studio that's involved with some of this activism, and the Smart Museum there in Chicago. But it's there to do the final delivery of the armored truck, to bring people's voices. I mean, it's all about someone else's voice, and respecting that as more precious as any work of art,
Mm,
and to give more value than the face value, because someone put their belief that their drawing could transform a situation that they have to live in.
mm,
And Chicago is very important because the situation with violence that occurs there, especially gun violence that we know too much about. I look at maps of lead poisoning of children in the 90s, and what neighborhood they come from, and all over
mm.
the country. And you see these correlations that need to be expressed, that we can change this. And it will take policy, and it will take people on both sides of the aisle to come together. So yeah, the whole
Absolutely.
story is on fundr.org, and we're an organism, and uh, and you could check it out. But
And a powerful one. And we put the link in the chat. So please, everyone, check that out.
yeah,
Molly, you not only, have you been in the business of morphing policy, but morphing language and messaging in order to morph belief in society. In your work, what tool has proven the most effective for change?
Yeah, so I've kind of gone through a journey in kind of understanding how we can get more folks behind systemic change. And so climate change is a structural issue. I mean, it's a crisis. And so it demands solutions at scale. And we cannot get solutions at scale. We cannot solve the climate crisis without systemic change. And in order to get systemic change, you need policy, you need government action, you need elections, you need elected officials who are going to get behind this. And that starts with the individual. And so in order to get that, you need to get, like I mentioned, the American people on board. They need to get behind this. And you cannot get them to get behind this until you meet them where they are. So that was kind of this process I went through of like, okay, how do we get better policy? Well, we actually have to go back to the public. And so one thing I started realizing was really impactful was harnessing the power of psychology and neuroscience in order to get people behind this, because ultimately I think climate change, it's an environmental issue, it's a public health issue, it's an economic issue. It's also an issue of how we understand this in people's brains. We're fighting this in people's minds just as much as we're fighting it on the ground. And so there's a lot of research behind this. A lot of it's based on the work of somebody named George Lakoff, who's a cognitive linguist who was at UC Berkeley for many years. And basically, like the basic idea is that we think through neural pathways. So when you have a thought, it actually fires a web of neurons in your brain, this web. And when you have that thought again, it fires it again. And that web of neurons grows stronger. And so that's why we have this term in neuroscience, neurons that fire together, wire together. And so what we have to do is called reframing, and we can get into that a little bit later, but it's this idea of instead of responding to people who are doing anti-climate narratives, which is what we've done for the last decade, we have to reframe this issue. And there are a lot of ways we can do that, that basically give more space for more people to be involved, for more folks to have a seat at the table, and for this to be way more systemically focused, by creating narratives that are human centered. So that's what I found to be really effective.
Amazing. There's so much we could dive into there, and I especially love nerding out about the science and neurons of the brain and how this all works. Celine, you touched on it on the last question in terms of what is a huge misconception about environmental justice, and I know you touched upon it in terms of like the activists that have to hold that space. What's another misconception? And then we'll go and ask the entire group this, that people could really benefit from debunking about environmental justice?
Yeah, there are so many. I appreciate what Molly was saying too about we fighting it inside of people's minds and we're fighting it on the ground. Whether or not they believe in it, or it is maybe their disempowerment facing it, and so therefore they don't know what to do. What can I do? I'm just one person. That's another misconception. But there are so many misconceptions, for example, that one person is going to fix it, or one action is going to fix it, or if we, even in a very big on a big complex topic, like for example what's going on in marine life with the documentary Seaspiracy. I didn't watch it, I just read all the critiques, because i just I know what's going on. I don't need to have like another doom and gloom scenario in my face, because that's a very one of the journeys of working in climate justice is that when we find out about a disaster or disastrous events, there is a time period of mourning and a time period of healing and a time period of acceptance and a time period of action. And sometimes we're able to accelerate all the way through action as fast as possible because we've been in that trauma trauma inducing system for so long that. And I speak just from my team. Like at Slow Factory, we are on the front lines basically of these news, this information, this working closely with scientists. So sometimes we don't want to watch these things because that there's no point. I understand. Let's just look into what we can do. But however, in these big complex situation, one of the misconception is that, well, we should stop eating fish. Let's all stop eating fish and let's all become vegan. That is a solution. How realistic is that to impose it across the board? And what happens to fishing communities or communities that are working with sustainably sourced fish or fish that feeds their communities and so on and so forth? So one of the misconception is a blanket statement that's going to fix the whole thing, and imposing that blanket statement, policing one another, whether or not we are, you know effectively doing that. And I think that um, the way to best address this is to understand that there is contradiction in our existence, and there's also complexity and nuance in how we are approaching these topics. And in an attempt to try to address all this, we started a TV show not too long ago called All of the Above. And this idea is that it's all of the above. It's not A, B, C, D, it's all of the above. What can you do? How can you address it personally, in your community? And that's another also misconception, is that it's an individual action. If all of us multiplied by 8 billions, we can do one action. It's so simplistic, it's almost impossible. And this type of impossible logic discourages a lot of people, and kind of, that's where the first battle begins in terms of convincing people that you could do something. So I don't know if I answered it. I feel it's a very misunderstood topic, right?
Mm,
Like it's a misunderstood situation. And a, we don't talk about it in the media. And doing the research for All of the Above, the TV show, we found that, according to Media Matter, there's only 0.4% of news, 0.4% of all the news across America that addressed climate change. That's in 2020, it was, I believe, 112 minutes through the whole year
mm,
of talking about climate on the news. Like, that's so small. Right? And so we don't talk about it at school. We barely talk about it as well in the educational system. I know teachers are starting now to explore it with the children, but we've never been exposed to these topics in their complexity. We don't really center science in our culture. We don't really encourage people to be intellectuals or to think. There are other measures of success that pushes people to not question so much and just, succeed. And so there's so many things. It's very layered, and
mm,
that's why we like to approach it as sustainability or climate justice is a culture. It's not something that you buy, it's not something that you do once. It's literally a culture. It's understanding this from a cultural point of view in that context, um, and through education, mostly, so that we
yeah.
can see that, there's nuance, but there's definitely the need for us to shift culturally outside of disposability and outside of consumption. Of course, that's on an individual level, but as Molly said, on a political level, on a governance level, how do we pass these policies? Policy follows culture, as Dr. Ayana Johnson says often.
Mm.
And yes, we need to make it a cultural movement.
Yes, and I know that we all share that sentiment very strongly. So thank you, Celine. Mel, I feel like your work sits in this beautiful place of irony, and um, and you're able to really get people to open their minds to misconceptions through your art. Um, is there a misconception in particular that you have very much enjoyed debunking?
Well, I haven't gotten there, but I would enjoy it. And that misconception, maybe I resemble that remark. The 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 idea of, first of all, maybe the misconception that there's such a thing as justice, as even the philosopher Derrida speaks of. It cannot be conceived as something that we can attain, or we'll stop looking for it and working for it, fighting for it, and it will elude us. And it's the same as, so if you add environmental justice, then you realize that they go hand in hand. The societal justice goes hand in hand with environmental justice. So it is exactly as Celine said, is the complexity of that is engendered immediately. I remember the first Earth Day was, I lived in two communities. I grew up in the Fifth Ward of Houston, right on the nickel, home of the ghetto boys. And our parents had a little store there. And then, then they moved us to the Jewish side of town. I remember going to Bel Air High School, and so there I learned about Earth Day. It was the first one, the '70s. I'm of that age, and I immediately gravitated toward that. But I realized something very early in the game back then. When we would talk about green ideas to my friends and neighborhoods and my neighbors down in the Fifth Ward, they say, well, we're talking about survival. We're talking about the trauma that we exist by being Black, being poor, being put upon every day of our lives. And thinking about something green is, we don't have that luxury. So that is something that we have to understand that when we talk about climate change, it's very interesting, and we go deeper into it. But I kind of think of that the obligation is to create other climates to get to what Molly is talking about, to create climates that don't. It's not about reaching that solution either. It's about creating a climate so you can begin again. To be even entertain a thought of transformation. I don't even like the word change because change is about power. I feel it's too much, it's too powerful. As an artist, I like to debunk that aspect and say it is about personal transformation and conditions of transformation that can be created. And maybe that's the job description, you know? That's how I'm feeling now these days. I'm feeling it.
You are a poet and you don't even know it. Maybe you do know it, but everything you're saying is beautiful, and resonates. Molly, I have a feeling, this is just a guess, but in a government environment, there might be a lot of misconceptions you have to debunk, not just to the people, but also internally. Tell us about your journey with misconceptions and debunking them.
I love this question. And really, I'm just going to build off of Céline and Mel, who just gave phenomenal answers around. I could not agree more with everything you both just said. So yeah, I mean, the number one myth and Céline really got into, there are misconceptions in this. We don't talk about that. Let environmentalists run with misconceptions, not only climate deniers, but on our side. The number one myth I know of and that I work to fight is that we can fight this by greening our lives. Now, for everybody that's greening their life, your heart is in the right place, and I commend you, and we should all keep doing that. If you have the time, the luxury, the resources, and the privilege of being able to green your life through a number of different means, whether that's riding your bike to work, which means you know how to ride a bike, which means you have access to a bike, whether that's going vegetarian, which means you have access to fresh and healthy food, which a lot of people who live in food deserts do not. If you have the luxury of being able to do that and you want to, please keep doing it. But that falls into the category I consider sustainable living. Fighting climate change is a totally different thing. Now, like Céline mentioned, ultimately, if people always say basically, well, if I, take some small action, it might not make a difference, but if everybody did it, then it will. That's false. Honestly, like that's false. If the math does not add up. When the denominator of you cutting, 1 or 2 tons of carbon out of your 16 to 17 ton of carbon annual footprint a year out of 30 billion global tons of carbon emissions, you have to just realize the math doesn't add up. And why? Because it is not your fault. Climate change is not the fault of everyday people. These are the fossil fuel industry is what we're up against. The 3 main sources of greenhouse gas emissions in the US are electricity, a third, transportation, a third, and industry, a third, fossil fuels. So I don't understand how we started blaming ourselves. And I started doing research on this. The idea of an individual carbon footprint, I have realized, is a complete sham. And so, we always thought this came from environmentalists. It was popularized by a massive, massive PR campaign by a firm called Ogilvy Mather in 2000, funded by a company called British Petroleum, or BP. I know you both know this well. Major fossil fuel company, the people that did the BP oil spill, those folks, they popularized the idea of an individual carbon footprint. And when they did this massive campaign where they said, we're in it together and we all have to make sacrifices, which are 2 frames I hate. We don't all have to make sacrifices. We have to work to fight the fossil fuel industry. The more you say we all have to make sacrifices, the less kind of everyday people who aren't part of the climate movement feel welcome in it. And in this process, basically, the term individual carbon footprint shot up in literature across the country. Shot up. You can see after 2000, this happened in all these analyses. And so all of a sudden, environmentalists took that torch and ran with it. And somehow we started, like Jasmine was saying earlier, we started blaming ourselves and we started blaming each other. And that I see, play out on social media all the time is people who want to use their platform for good, which is amazing. What better thing could they do? They want to use their platform for good. Will start advocating for climate action and just get attacked. I know influencers who have gotten death threats for trying to say, the environment is a good thing to care about. And so ultimately, people have taken it upon themselves to basically systematically try and kick people out of the climate movement. I always wonder, what are they doing to fight climate change? What are they doing to cut greenhouse gas emissions in the US? I don't really think it's that effective. And so there is an answer, right? On the other side, I believe individuals can make a huge difference. I have seen it play out. And the way we can do this, when people come to me and they say, what's the one thing I can do? And they expect me to tell them to go vegetarian. I say, register people to vote. When you register people to go vote, you give people who don't have a voice, you enfranchise them. All of a sudden, communities who have been completely left out of narratives, left out of the political system, have a voice, which is extraordinary. And when that happens, we know that progressives get elected, climate candidates get elected. They go into office, they institute systemic change. That has way bigger influence, because when you go vegan, for example, maybe you don't want to, say you go vegan, it doesn't really do much for, we're talking about environmental justice, the community across town that is suffering from massive air pollution because they're behind the Chevron refinery, for example. And that's what's happening in Richmond, right? San Francisco environmentalists are talking about polar bears in the Arctic, while meanwhile, across the bay, a frontline community is breathing the air from a Chevron refinery with some of the highest asthma rates in the country. It's always communities of color. The number one determinant of where you put a fossil fuel power plant, a toxic waste site, is the racial makeup of the community surrounding it. This is environmental racism, right? When we talk about this, these aren't accidents. They're not things that happen. They're not outcomes. They are political decisions, active decisions of who matters more and who matters less, and whose public health we're willing to sacrifice and whose we're not. And that's the work of environmental justice that's so powerful, is not only kind of integrating environmental justice into the environmental movement, making it lead. Because like I always mention, communities of color, they're the original climate activists. They've been fighting for clean air and clean water for their children, like Mel described, for decades. Long before climate change was a term, long before Al Gore made a film, they've been talking about this. So greening our lives can only go so far. And if you really care about systemic change and fighting climate action, everybody's greening their lives, come register people to vote. That's how we're going to make a really big difference together. Individuals can have a huge impact. And also, it's way easier and it's really fun to be out there in your community, giving people a voice. It's really fun to be able to do that. And it's way easier than shutting off your heat and power in the middle of night when you need it most. Really extreme action is required to cut this sham carbon footprint. Because it's basically taking a system based in fossil fuels and it's allotting blame onto the end users who are forced to use it, which is you. We're not deciding when we plug in our phone at night that it's coming from fossil fuels versus clean energy. You're living in the only system you've been given. So we need to stop blaming each other, and we need to focus on changing that system so that when I plug in my phone at night, it's going to be coming from a cleaner grid. So that's what I would say. Number one misconception.
I feel better.
Molly, I'm so glad that you brought up race, because yes, we cannot talk about climate justice without talking about racial justice, without talking about social justice. And once you start to deep dive into the linear connection of each, it's very daunting and very scary, but the knowledge is so powerful because it allows you to literally see the interconnectedness of the world. But I feel like what you just connected for all of us, Molly, was incredible. And thank you so much for that. I'm going to ask one more question, and then if we have time, we'll take a question from the audience. Given, that we're talking about art and creativity, I know that each of you express your art and creativity in different ways. Obviously, Mel is quite literal. Molly, it's through language, it's through campaigns. Celine, Celine, your whole graphic visual art that comes out through Slow Factory is so enticing and beautiful. But I'd love for each of you to express how art applies to your activism, and that art can also dive deep into what it means to be creative, because every human is creative. Celine, let's start with you.
So, for example, me, the only thing I studied is art, and I always have been drawing, and I've been identifying as an artist since a very young age. I feel like identifying as an artist because I come from a, immigrant family, a refugee family, and being that was just not a no, that was not an option. And I, wanted to be that, to do art, and I managed to convince my parents to give me 1 year of art school in Paris. So I went there. I saved up all my money. I lived in on someone's couch, and I went to art school in Paris for just 1 year. And I feel it was the most formative year of my life. And everything that I've done after that has been taken from the knowledge I've received from that 1 year. And the one thing, after the 1 year, my dad was like, "It's over, time's up. You have to go to a real university." And I'm like, "Oh," and he's like, "Go to Canada," because we immigrated to Canada as refugees during the war. So uh, I was a child refugee at 5 years old, and we went to Canada. So Canada kind of adopted us. So he's like, "Go back there." I was in Beirut at the time, and he's like, "That's it, your art life is done, you have to go to school." But the only thing that kept me going was one thing that I've learned at art school at this 1 year, is that art is life, okay? And conceptual art is what you make of it. L'art, c'est la vie in French, okay? Art is life. And I took that and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make everything I do my art. And if I can't be an artist, I'll make it my art. So I feel like running Slow Factory has started like an art experiment, because we were like, let's print NASA images on sustainable fabrics so that people can wrap themselves with the world, the earth, and so they can feel connected to this data, blah blah blah. Like everything that we did was with this idea, or this experiment, or this creative confidence, I guess, just to be like, you know what, everything is art. I really believe that. I see it every day in all the things, and it's this way of looking at things. So I feel like, to me, art is life and life is art. And
Mm,
that's how I make peace with the fact that I couldn't go where I wanted to go, but then I can bring it where I am.
wherever you are. I love that. Mel.
Yay. So I've been working at this for 40 years, and I realized that um, I don't know how to do it yet. So it's almost like I want to become an artist, as a state of mind to actually become one, you know. And that means that all the definitions of it have fallen short, because it's not about it defining it as art. It's how it can evolve and how it can transmit things. James Baldwin spoke of it beautifully as like the purpose of it is to, and I paraphrase him, that art is to provoke the question, or to find the question that is buried within the answers. And so, going through this practice, and it goes many different ways, I've learned that. So it is about seeking how to create that question. And sometimes it's not your question. It's actually, if you're working to be an activist, you go to people and find their questions and their their needs. I remember going to Flint because of our lead project, because of course what was happening. And I went there and I was confronted by, first I said, bring together all the people from different neighborhoods of Flint, and I want the leaders, and let's bring up this idea. So they met us, and it was at the start a little bit hostile, because they said, Hillary's been here, Trump's been here, Obama's been here, Janae Monell has been here, maybe even that Bradley Pitt's been here, you know, and we still don't have any goddamn clean drinking water, you know? And so you, Mr. Artist, so you want to take some pictures, or you want to tell us how to show the world how we live in this? We know how to live in it. We don't need to that. So tell us what you have. So I listened. I said, for a year now, I wasn't thinking about that. I said, I was just thinking that you have to drink out of those bottles because you can't drink out of your pipes. And I come here to hire you to collect those bottles and throw them in this big old truck. And I'll take them down to North Carolina, and we'll turn it into fabric. And then I'm going to talk to this amazing designer, Tracy Reese, and to design, a project called Flint Fit. And we'll make swimwear and rainwear. And we'll come back to this basketball court that you're working in here, and of a church that you turned into a sewing factory, and sew those things up. and then we'll
Yeah.
maybe bring some hope instead, just a
Yeah.
little bit. We cannot promise a change of all the pipes and all that, but I can say that I think I don't need to teach you how to live in it, but the question that you gave me was like, what did I need to bring? It's not what I need to bring, it's what we can do together. And if you don't like this concept, I'm out of here, you know? And they agreed to do it. So right now, Tracy passed this. Tracy has got a new line of clothing, and she hired that church to help sew them up. So there's a job. See, it's the intention was this idea about bottles and fabrics, etc. You know, but it became like an opportunity for
Right.
life, as Celine has mentioned, to
Right.
emerge. So it's like creating that question and asking that question to others
I
can
love
help.
it. Thank you, Mel. And Molly, this will be a two-part question because I do want to get to um, a couple of questions we have from the audience. We have 4 minutes left, so let's try to power the answers a bit. But Molly, when you tell us how art and creativity has applied to your activism, can you also answer afterwards a question from an anonymous person? What is the next advocacy step after voting? What can we do to organize that is most effective?
Okay, I'm going to start with answering that. I'm so glad somebody asked this. So, when you think about systemic change, think government, politics, elections, campaigns. Those things are all related, right? This is how somebody, instead of, like advocating for one part of this, or me as an individual going and buying more energy efficient light bulbs, this is how we actually clean the entire grid for everybody. So, that can look like a lot of things. So, for those that have the privilege of being able to do that, that are able to donating to environmental organizations that are doing advocacy, that's one effective way. The even more effective way is to join one. And there are a lot of organizations like the League of Conservation Voters, a lot of organizations that have local chapters in your community, or you can sign up online to figure out what they're doing. They are doing advocacy, and they're doing kind of the hard work of figuring out what is it we need to be doing, what is it we need to be advocating for. You don't have the luxury of being able to have all that time, right? Even I don't, right? So these organizations can really give you that established way of kind of being a part of this. More importantly, though, like I mentioned, I'm not just saying vote. Voting is like the baseline. I'm saying register people to vote. Help us expand the electorate. Not that many people vote in America. So if you can register 10 voters a year, that has a huge impact. I cannot understate how important that is. And if you get a lot of people to do that with you, right, that's where the individual action combining with other people, that's where it has real impact. The denominator is way less than 30 billion tons of carbon emissions. So that's a lot of things that people can do. Just think campaigns help elect climate candidates. If there's a climate candidate that's running, any progressive that's running for office in your local community, for your state senate assembly member, your senator, your congresswoman or congressman, all of those things, work on their campaign. You can make calls, knock on doors, all of that's related to community organizing, which is really powerful. Okay, the question about yes, okay, and then Jasmine's question. So what's really powerful is reframing. And so we've done this thing where we've actually taken anti-climate narratives and we've responded to them rather than created our own. And we have no idea we're doing this. There are a lot of examples of this. And again, this is based on the work of George Lakoff. I don't have a ton of time to go deeply into this, but for anybody that's interested in it, I'm happy to talk to you about it. Or I encourage you to read The Political Mind, which is a book he's written about this. But for example, if somebody's saying climate action hurts the economy, I cannot say, no, climate action does not hurt the economy, because when we talk about that neural network and that wiring, I'm wiring climate action in a hurt economy, even when I say no or not. That doesn't really have an impact. When you tell somebody not to think about something, that's what they think about. We have to reframe. And when I talk about reframing, we have to move it into the realm of environmental justice. And we do this through public health. That is how, you cannot talk about social justice, environmental justice without talking about public health. That is the intersection. It's talking about the fact that 1 in 10 Black children in America has asthma. And when I cite that statistic, it's so horrifying for people. They don't believe me and they'll fact check me on it. And I can promise you it's real. The NAACP has done tremendous work in documenting these truths that they're very aware of for everybody else. That's real, right? So another word for climate change is just pollution. It's affecting air quality. It's affecting, like Mel was talking about, water quality, all of these things. And
Mhm.
that's a reality we have to wake up to. And we can do that through stopping to talk about polar bears, through stopping to talk about going vegan, even though if you want to go vegan, you are great. I commend you. And moving this more into the space of human-centered narratives around systemic change.
I think that's a beautiful chapter to end on. I absolutely want to thank my three panelists here, Molly Kawahata, Mel Chin, and Cèline Semaan. Please look on either my Instagram or Unity in Colors Instagram, which I just put the website in the chat, to follow all of these individuals to learn more about their art, their programs, their policies that they are advocating for. We hope that we can all stay in touch as a community, not just on Earth Day, but every single day. Thank you, LACMA and Cello, again for giving us this space. You three are such beautiful human beings. Thank you for sharing your words, your art, and your wisdom. My name is Jasmine Solano, founder of Unity in Color, and I live for talks like this. I hope to see everyone soon, and thank you so much for coming to our LACMA panel. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.